Christopher Clark is Hunter's attorney, who he's been dealing with this case now for several years, and he just issued a statement that describes the outlines of what we've been talking about. What he says is, with the announcement of 2 agreements between my client, Hunter Biden, and the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Delaware, it is my understanding that the 5-year investigation into Hunter is resolved. That is the key sentence right there. It is my understanding that the 5-year investigation into Hunter is resolved. Hunter will take responsibility for 2 instances of misdemeanor failure to file tax payments when due to a plea agreement. The firearm charge will be subject to a pretrial diversion agreement and will not be subject to the plea agreement, but will also be filed by the government. Here's also what he says about Hunter. He says, I know Hunter believes it is important to take responsibility for these mistakes he made during a period of turmoil and addiction in his life. He looks forward to continuing his recovery and moving forward. Of course, again, the key operative parts of that statement are that, at least in their discussions with prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office, again, this is a U.S. Attorney, David Weiss, who was appointed by Donald Trump, kept on in this job to oversee this investigation. This deal that resolves this investigation, according to Hunter Biden's attorneys, they believe this resolves everything. And really, that's an important part of this plea agreement because this investigation, as we've talked about, spanning 5 years, 3 attorneys general have looked at a lot of issues, including Hunter Biden's financial dealings in Ukraine, his work with a Chinese energy company, things that Republicans are not ready to let go of. They believe that there's more investigation to be done. So even if Hunter Biden's attorneys believe that this investigation is over, at least the criminal investigation with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Delaware, they may face a lot more questions from House Republicans who are not quite done with this yet. Kate, John?
All right. Evan, stick with us. Continue to work your sources and get more statements coming in on the statements and reaction that is coming in. Let's get back over to the White House. Arlette Saenz is there. And Arlette, we're hearing from the President and the First Lady now.
Yeah, we have the first reaction just came in moments ago from the White House as the Bidens are continuing to offer their support to their son, Hunter Biden. I want to read you this quote from a White House spokesperson, Ian Sams. He said, quote, the President and First Lady love their son and support him as he continues to rebuild his life. He added, we will have no further comment. Now, the President is out traveling in California. We expect to see him in the 4 p.m. Eastern hour when he delivers a speech there. So we will see whether he might have any opportunities to weigh in on these federal charges facing his son, Hunter Biden. His wife, First Lady Jill Biden, is here at the White House with an event a bit later today. But the statement from the White House really tracks with what we've repeatedly heard from the Biden couple over the years relating to their son, Hunter. They have long stressed their support for him. And really, President Biden has sought to keep him very close to him here at the White House. He is a frequent presence over the course of the past few years, both at family events, but even coming at times for some official events. For instance, he was out mingling in a crowd with the president as they hosted the annual Easter egg roll back in April. He traveled with the president over to Ireland as they went to look into their familial roots in the president's long-standing love for the country of Ireland as well. But it also comes as the White House has really tried to refrain from weighing into any matters regarding the Justice Department investigation into Hunter Biden. They've gone to great lengths to try to ensure that this has been an independent investigation. But officials here at the White House, the president's personal attorney, Bob Bauer, have been keeping tabs on the case, with Bob Bauer speaking with Hunter Biden's legal team from time to time to get updates on where things stood. But really, the Biden family has been navigating the issue of their son, Hunter Biden, for years. He became a frequent target for Republicans and former President Donald Trump back during the 2020 campaign. Biden often and repeatedly would defend his son, Hunter, including his addiction issues that he had faced. But now, today, as these federal charges are coming to light, as Hunter Biden is pleading guilty to at least 2 of those federal charges, the president and first lady maintaining their unwavering support for their son in that statement. We'll see whether there's any further reaction over the course of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Arlette.
And again, we will see the president later today. They say this is the only statement they will have. I would be surprised if we do not hear something from President Biden directly on this subject coming up. Again, the statement from the attorney for Hunter Biden says, quote, it is my understanding that the 5-year investigation into Hunter is resolved. There is one place that I feel will not share that sentiment. It may be among Republicans on Capitol Hill. Let's go there right now. Our Manu Raju standing by. Manu, what are you hearing up there? Is there a sense among Republicans that it's resolved?
It's most certainly not. I mean, we have not heard any official reaction from the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, or any of the key chairmen of the House committees who have been investigating Hunter Biden and some of his overseas business dealings. But we are hearing some reaction from some members of the rank and file who have been quick to issue tweets criticizing this plea deal and criticizing the Justice Department. So Darrell Issa, a Republican from California, called it a cover-up. This was a word from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is a member of the far-right House Freedom Caucus, someone who is a close ally of the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, said that it's simply it called it a, quote, stunt, and called the Justice Department pathetic. And then Congressman Bob Good, another member of that Freedom Caucus, the outspoken group on the right, also criticizing this as well. What you can expect from House Republicans in the weeks ahead is try to essentially investigate the investigators, try to figure out why this U.S. attorney did not pursue did not file charges, or how he handled those questions about Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings that did not lead to any federal charges here. There is expect to be a lot of criticism, even though this is an attorney that is a holdover from the Trump administration. Still not, the Republicans are indicating this is all part of their narrative that Democrats somehow get a pass and Republicans do not. We'll see if the facts bear any of that out, but that is their political argument going forward. So expect to hear the Speaker of the House to repeat a lot of these arguments. Expect to hear some of the chairmen of the key committees, like the House Oversight Committee, the House Judiciary Committee, also indicating the same. So you're right. This plea deal reached. The Hunter Biden team says after a result of an exhaustive investigation leading to this plea deal, not going to be much satisfaction here on Capitol Hill among House Republicans who have made this a central investigation looking into Hunter Biden, as well as any ties to the president. And they've expected that to be the focus in the weeks ahead, guys.
All right, Manu Raju, thank you very much. Keep us posted as to what else you hear. And we should note, again, this is a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who was a holdover here who struck this plea deal.
Yeah, so you have that. Let's get over to Kara Scannell. She's outside court. She's been tracking this with us. Kara, you've also have some fresh reporting now on with this deal will bring what punishment?
Yeah, so our understanding, according to sources, is that the U.S. Attorney's Office here has agreed, as part of this plea agreement, to recommend to the judge that Hunter Biden serve no prison time, that he be put on probation for a set period of time. One source saying that that's about 24 months. And we haven't seen those details yet. The court filings indicate that additional materials, including this plea agreement, will be filed before the court appearance whenever that is set. But that is what we've learned, that he will not face any jail time, any prison time, as a result of pleading guilty to those two tax-related misdemeanors. And it's already drawing a reaction from former President Trump, who is posting that this deal equates to, quote, a mere traffic ticket, and something certainly, as Manu was referencing, is something that the Republicans on the Hill are going to continue to focus on, and as they continue to look at DOJ's handling of this investigation. But we are also waiting to see when the judge will set a date for Hunter Biden to appear for his arraignment, where he will enter that guilty plea and be told, to allocute, to say what he did and what went wrong. And as the lawyer's statement that Evan had read earlier indicates, they're positioning this as he's trying to take accountability for the crimes that he committed when he was an addict, which he has been very public about. So this is part of that step in that process. But he will be coming to court soon to enter this guilty plea. And then on this gun possession charge, that is a diversion in which that will be a charge that is essentially dropped if he meets certain conditions for that same period of time. Kate?
Kara, thank you so much. Continuing to work her sources on this. Thank you.
Probation. Okay, let's talk about what that means in terms of this deal, where it sits. Joining us now, our senior legal analyst, Ellie Honig, and Paula Reed, I believe, is with us somewhere as well. Paula, again, actually, Ellie, let me start with you. I just want to stipulate one thing here to make one thing clear. President Biden, in his public comments of late, has been saying he did not think that Hunter Biden did anything wrong. This is an admission, an
That he did something
acknowledgement
wrong.
that he did something wrong. Hunter Biden is admitting he broke the law here, and as part of that admission, he is apparently agreeing to probation. Talk to me about that.
Right. So probation, first and foremost, means no prison as long as you comply with all the conditions. There will be a specific set of conditions put on this probation. They can vary case to case, but typically, first of all, no further crimes. If you do commit a crime while you're on probation, the penalty will be even higher. Right. Typically, in a case like this, a condition will include drug treatment. Regular drug testing could be weekly, daily, monthly. Typically, you'll have to report in to your pretrial officer or your probation officer every day, every week. It varies based on the individual. And I do think there's another important point to be made here about the timing and the sort of politics about this. I have said before the fact that this took 5 years is outrageous and inexplicable, dating back to 2018. But when we think about the nature of the charges here, let's remember, for at least 2 full years, 2018 through the end of 2020, this was being handled by Donald Trump's administration under AG Jeff Sessions and then Bill Barr. And if there was heavier charges to be brought, they had 2 years, probably 2+ years, to do that.